All right. First and foremost, give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem HaKakodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, who rule well and who is worthy to be counted for double honors. And peace and salutations to you brothers out there pushing this truth wholeheartedly and sincerely and full of the gospel. It's your brother Gabaria from the Indiana camp, coming back at you again with another sit down. I'm gonna entitle this video the movie 2073 is a very good movie, all right, or something to along that lines. But I checked out this movie about maybe a day or two ago, and it hits a post-apocalyptic dystopia type, type movie. It just basically it really just shows what type of lives we might have to live when things, go south. When things ain't gonna be always in our favor. Without giving the movie away too much, it hits on like technology, on how technology is gonna be so advanced, where they have face recognition everywhere. They have the dogs, the little robot dogs, patrolling the streets. In the little building you see now, this building right here was the only like building in the world, so to speak, and it kept all the rich, the super rich, elite, people in there. Basically they had fresh food, entertainment, and all that other stuff, and everybody else had to fend for themselves. Scrapping for food and scrapping for resources and pull it together, and and the lady, the main character, she was a scavenger. She was the one who go out and scavenge supplies and bring it back to the so-called base or whatever. And the base was like in like a sewer. All right, you had families, you had babies. All right, in my opinion, it gives a real intake on how what we might have to go through. It gives a good visual, of what we might have to do, what we might have to go through, what we might have to endure before Yahweh Shem Yahushua comes back. All right, and I was talking to another brother who also watched the video. The brother Kaya had said, "Man, we gonna need Yahweh Shem Yahushua." And that right there, I was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely." Because the type of once you watch this movie, I'm not gonna play the trailer, just in case I want to take the video down or whatever. But if they the movie's called 2073. I seen it on HBO Max. Brother said they watched it on Prime or whatever. But once you see the type of predicament that they're in, man, they had no hope. Their resources, their water, everything was limited. And when the brother said, "Yeah, we're gonna need the Lord in that day," that's the first thing I thought of. Like, yeah, it's not going. You're not gonna be able to survive off your wits or off your might or off of the. It literally look, everything that came across was a luck of the draw. Now, yeah, certain things that the Lord, endowed, and the knowledge that He endowed, like how to purify water, probably how to dress an animal. Those things are good to know, but you don't trust in that. Matter of fact, the scripture says what? Let me go ahead and grab it right quick. Oh man, Slocky, bear with me for a minute. I know it's in here somewhere. I just gotta find the right word. I thought it said might and boast. Glory. I'm thinking I said boast. It says glory. Okay, Slocky. Thought of y'all Bashim Ashai for revealing it. This is Jeremiah 9:23. It says, thus said the Lord, let not the wise man glory in his wisdom. It says, neither let the mighty man glory in his might. Let not the rich man glory in his riches. It says, but let him that glorieth glory in this, that he understandeth and knoweth me, and I am the Lord which exercise loving kindness, judgment, and righteousness in the earth. For in these things I delight, saith the Lord. See, so, it's not going to be, off your might or off your wisdom or off your riches that you're surviving or you're maintaining, but it's just off the grace and mercy of Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. All right. And you have to go into this thing. You have to go into this trouble being fully persuaded in that first. Yeah, the scripture says wisdom and knowledge shall be the stability of our time, but it's ultimately going to be what the Lord sanctions for it to happen. Now, if the Lord, now if you know how to purify water, if you have a few things stacked up for food and you know how to, hunt and fish and do all that, stuff. If you have the skills to do that, those things are good. Those things are good to have, but you don't supposed to trust in those. You're not supposed to rely solely on well, I know how to hunt, I know how to do this, I know how to do that, so I'm straight. You're not supposed to rely on that, because the whole reason the Lord is putting you through this is to see, are you going to lean on him? Are you going to trust in him? Are you going to put aside of what the thing, well, I know how to do this, I know how to do that? Or are you going to be like, well, the Lord's going to provide this and the Lord's going to provide that, And that's exactly what mindset we should be going into. That's what mindset you actually should be practicing now, At this current moment right now, my bank account is looking highly funny, very funny, actually, And I don't get paid. What's today? Friday. I don't get paid until next Wednesday, Now, I'm not, saying that, I'm not putting this out there like, oh, look at me. Like, my faith is this, my faith is that. But I'm putting it out there to saying, like, it's certain time, it's certain weeks and certain days that I have to just completely rely on the Lord. Like, hey, I'm finna put this last, 20, 30, 40 bucks in my tank. And Lord, it's up to you, Whatever I get after that is cool. Whatever I get after that, the Lord's going to have to, look out, So really, to be honest, we should start already getting in that type of mindset now, relying on the Lord, trusting in the Lord, not boasting on like, well, I got a job or I got money saved up or I got this saved up, because ain't none of that's going to be what saves you, only the trust in the Lord. All right. I'm going to grab this. It's one of my favorite. It's in the book of Psalms. Psalms 20:7 says, some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God. See, so we're not gonna rely on our vehicles. We're not gonna rely on any of those tangible things, but we're gonna rely on who? Yahweh Bashim Yahushua. That's where our trust is gonna reside in, And in that movie, 2073, you like I said, if you watch it, you'll clearly see why trusting in the Lord is going to be not detrimental, Slocky, crucial. That's the word I'm looking for. Crucial, because you're not going to have anything else to rely in, Trusting in the Lord, having that relationship with Yahweh Shem Yahushua is going to be crucial, you know. And then the scripture says, what? Look at the generation of old, Has any ever trusted in the Lord and was confounded, So if you truly believe that you're a man of the Lord, and you trust in Yahweh Shem Yahushua wholeheartedly, what does the scripture say? I've not have seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread, And the scriptures also says, what? If the Lord be for it, who can be against it? So if the Lord wants you, to survive and do this, and another thing is you have to learn how to listen to the Spirit, It might be a building that looks like it got some food, it got plenty of food or whatever. It has a nice resources to lodge at, but the Spirit might not tell you to go in there. Say, hey, don't go in there. You might have a feeling where you're like, damn, I don't know why I got this feeling not to go in there, But if you don't listen to the Spirit and you go in there anyways, then guess what? You might have a whole bunch of troops in there. And as soon as you walk through the door, they looking at you. Now they finna, take you down. Or if you run and escape, you might escape. You might get away. But what? You could have completely avoided that if you'd listened to the Spirit. That's why the scripture says, walk them circumspectly, not as fools, Yeah, we do that now. We're practicing it now. And really, to be honest, and another thing too is, man, a lot of things that that was happening in that movie, we're preparing for it now, Now, there's no amount of preparation that you can do to be ready for it, but certain tactics and certain things about this truth is going to have you mentally prepared. The Lord is gearing you up. He's not just going to throw you in the fire. He's going to make sure his men are ready for it, Which means, man, we're not out here just doing willy-nilly things and just saying, oh, well, the Lord's gonna take care of us. The Lord's gonna take care of us. No, you have to do some type of works, So you got what? Brothers in the gym, brothers getting their diet together, Certain brothers is going on fast to get their body used to not going a couple of days without food, Brothers are getting their mental health, straightened out. All right, they physical bodies, where if they need to jog a few miles, or if they need to get away, they can, Brothers who got some weight on them is starting to shed down, starting to drop a couple pounds, So what? The Lord is preparing his men for that time, But not saying that the Lord is not saying you rely on that. Like, oh man, I can run 5 miles in 45 minutes, Not saying you rely on that, but that's a good thing that you do that, Like even owning weaponry, if you feel like if you feel like the Lord's putting on your spirit to own, probably a couple knives or a piece, whatever, then there's nothing wrong with that. Just don't the point that we hammer, especially the men of Great Millstone, because I don't really see no other camps hammering this, is you just don't rely on those things. You don't put your trust in them. You can have them. You can have them and deal with them, but you just don't rely on that. You don't say, oh man, where my peace at? When shit go from good to bad, you don't. The first thing you're not supposed to be thinking about, oh man, where my peace? Where my peace? I need my peace. I can't do nothing without my peace. Where's my bug out bag? I need my bug out bag. I need my combat boots. You're not supposed, because when shit, you might be at work. You might be visiting a brother in another city. You might not even be at home. You might, you might go visit some brothers in another city, or might go out of town for something. And then boom, look, now hell hit. Now you stuck out there. Now every little advantage you thought you had, I know the layout of the land. I know this, and now you in a whole nother city, don't know how to maneuver around anything. Now you have to survive. Now you really gonna have to trust in the Lord, But ultimately, what the Lord said He's gonna have us. What it says in what it says in the book of Revelations. It says Revelations 3:10. It says, because thou hast kept the word of my patience, I will also keep thee from the hour of temptation, which shall come upon all the world to try them that dwell upon the earth. So the Lord's gonna keep you. The Lord's gonna make sure you're straight. It's not gonna be an easy walk. It's still gonna be it's still gonna be a walk. You know, you're still gonna have to make that journey. But ultimately, what the Lord is gonna have your back. The Lord is gonna make sure you're straight. You know, the scripture says what in the book of Isaiah, it says what ye shall be hungry, my servant shall eat, my servant shall drink. You know, you shall lament, and my servant shall rejoice. You know. So what? The Lord's going to make sure his servants, the ones who's truly honor his name, and the ones who's truly following after him, are going to be straight, you know? And like I encourage brothers to go watch that movie, you're going to see exactly, it's going to give you it's going to give you a visual of how bad things are going to get, you know? Yeah, we talk about it, you know, but watching certain movies like this, like 2073, you know, a post-apocalyptic dystopia type, you know, movies helps paint a picture on how bad it's gonna be. You know, what I Am Legend type, you know, cities becoming completely vacant or completely destroyed. You know, all type of diseases, all types of smells happening in the world. And the scripture says what in the book of Zechariah, it says what the Lord shall bring the third part through that fire. You know, so you're gonna still have to go through it. You're still gonna have to endure it. But guess what? That's just what's going to make you even that much more precious to Yahweh Bashim Yahshai. Because once you go through that fire, once you go through that fire, which is the fire is a purification process. Once the Lord brings you through that fire, that just makes you that much more valuable. That's why the Lord compared you as gold. It says what? As gold is tried in the fire. You know, it come and what does fire do? Fire melts away all the impurity, all the basically dross out of the gold to make that gold that much more pure. You know, and dross are metals that people mix with gold. All right, to make it kind of like last longer. I mean, not last longer. It's like to help it stretch. You know. Let's say you got an ounce of gold, but you want to make a gold chain. You ain't going to make a gold chain with an ounce of gold. You're going to mix that with other metals to make it look, you know, to make it to make it appear like gold, but it has other metals mixed in with it, you know. But the Lord is going to what? He's going to burn away all those impurities out of you. So once you come through that fire, you're going to be that much more acceptable. You're going to be that much more pure, you know, and holy. All right. Matter of fact, let me go ahead and grab that. Where am I at? Yep, this is Sirach chapter 2 and verse 4. It says, whatsoever is brought upon thee, take cheerfully, and be patient when thou art changed to a lower state. For gold is tried in the fire, and acceptable men in the furnace of adversity. Believe in him, and he will help thee. Order thy way aright, and trust in him. It says, ye that fear the Lord, await for his mercy, and go not aside, lest ye fall. See? So what? All that is going into trusting in the Lord, you know, because that's what's going to make you acceptable. You know, you have to go through the fire in order for you to get something that's actually precious and actually means anything. You're going to have to sacrifice a little for it, you know, and that's with anything. If you want a nice ripped body, you know, big back, big biceps, big chest, big shoulders, whatever. Guess what? You're going to have to spend time and dedication in the gym. You're going to have to make sure your diet is on point. You're going to have to lift weights. That shit burns. You know, you're literally tearing your muscle fibers. You're sacrificing something for it, you know. If you want a good and healthy career or a job or whatever, guess what? You have to go to fucking. You have to do the requirements to get it. I'm talking about a good job that's paying like 200,000, 300,000, or whatever. You have to get certain requirements, go to school, get all this, get all that, know people. You're gonna have to sacrifice time and effort for the things that you want. You know, and the things that's really just handed out to you, or you get real easy. You really don't value it because the way you got it. You be like, yeah, I just spent like, something that's $5, you ain't gonna really trip versus something that's $500. You know, if it's $5, you ain't really gonna be like, it could be anything. It's $5, I ain't tripping. Versus something that's $500, you can be like, yeah, it's kind of a grip. I gotta kind of, be careful with that. Let's say you buy a $5 watch. And they get a scratch on it or something happened to it, you'd be like, it's only $5, whatever. But let's say you buy a $500 watch. You gonna make sure that watch is protected at all times. If you see a little scratch, if you see anything on it, you gonna be like, man, what the fuck, man? How the fuck? You're gonna be tripping about it. So what? The Lord is making it acceptable, and He's bringing, the purest of pure, the finest of fine men. All right. The men of the Lord are the choice pick, They're you got the nation of Israel, who are already the choice as a nation. We're already a choice pick unto the Lord, But even within the nation of Israel, the elect stands above all, Just imagine if you have 10 teams, let's say you have 10 football teams or whatever. And you pick one football team to shine above the rest of the football teams. And then you have your MVPs, the ones who stand out that's in that football team. You might have 5 individuals that's just above all the they're in that badass football team. But within that football team, they stand out even higher. That's how the elect is to the Lord. The 10 teams represents the world and the nations, but one of the nations is above the rest of the 9. And they're the choice pick. But even within them, you have the 5 MVPs that stands out even above the choice pick, and that's the elect. You see? That's how the Lord looks at the elect. All right? They're the choice pick. They're and guess what? When times get rough, the Lord's going to make sure He said, yeah, well, I prepared you for this, I prepared you. This is the reason why I put it on your spirit for the past 2, 3, 4 years to start running, And guess what? You're going to be like, yeah, nah, I see why the Lord have me, and you're going to see why the Lord had you go through certain things, So if the Lord got you going through certain things now in the time we're in before things really start, hitting the pavement like that, best believe the Lord's having you going through it because He's probably preparing you, If the Lord's putting on your spirit to fast a lot, to get your body right, then guess what? You might go, a couple of days, even a week or 2 without food, But guess what? You're gonna be used to it because what you've been fasting, all right, or you've been going without food for a considerable amount of time. So the Lord had you already mentally prepared for that, And you might hit the hail might hit, and you be like, man, I haven't had no food in a minute, whatever. But I ain't tripping, I'm cool, Maybe it's all that preparation the Lord had me go through. So that's pretty much all I had. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anything else. No, that's pretty much all I had. I encourage brothers to go watch the movie again. It was called 2073. And another thing too, they hit in the movie is when they hit all the global catastrophes. It hits the Great Depression. It hits when the economy collapsed back in 2008. All right. It hits what else? Of course, it hits September 11. It hits that. It hits all the global pandemics of the world. And it basically shows how it was leading up to this point. How the rich got richer. And the poor just basically got poor. They say that in the movie. The rich got richer and the poor got poor. Where it's not even a fine line between them no more. You don't have your I'm not poor, but I ain't rich neither. You don't have that. It's either you're extremely poor or you're extremely rich. So So yeah, like I said, I encourage brothers to go watch it. Lord willing, if this video was edifying. Until next time, shalom.